Hello. Today I want to walk through a few steps around governance, around complaints, but specifically I want to talk about this within the context of Black women within financial services. I think there was an article earlier on this year that said out of all groups that are minoritized and or marginalized, Black women are the group in particular within asset management that we are not making the progress we should be, B, there's not enough representation, and C, the dial hasn't really moved in terms of our experience. And when I was thinking about this, you can always think around retention, attraction, engagement, those three key pillars. However, in many companies, the strength of its processes are not usually around when things are going well, but actually the opposite, when things are going badly. And I wanted to kind of go through and walk through that a little bit today, for the fact that when anybody makes a complaint, it's difficult enough as it is. But when you're a Black woman, there's so much more that you have to think about within this context. You have to think about the scarcity factor. You have to think about, in terms of the power pyramid, you have the least in common. You have neither gender nor race in common with those who sit at the top. So in explaining your problems, there's less commonality, which usually means that the outcome, the chances of a positive outcome are in fact less. And as members of HR and or managers, it's really critical that this is understood as to how you can improve the process. Because I don't know, if you speak, well, depending on who you are, but I will reference this because my insights report will be coming out soon. But one of the hardest things to do is to actually, especially as a Black woman, is actually to speak and say, I've experienced racism and or sexism. Because and or sexism, once you've said this, it's usually the knee-jerk reaction is, we support women, we support Black women, we have zero tolerance for, all those things that happen, all those statements that happen externally, even internally, but is often not reflected in the experience of Black women on a day-to-day basis. And this is where it's very key that governance plays a role, that processes and procedures play a role in ensuring that Black women are protected in this context. In general, but in particular the complaints context. So if you look, at this diagram, the title is, will my reputation be tarnished and will I become that Black colleague? Because more often than not, once a Black woman has made a complaint, she's automatically pigeonholed as being difficult, especially if the person she's made a complaint against is either powerful or in a revenue generating position. So when you kind of go through everything as you as a manager and HR person needs to realize is that before she's come to you, she's gone through all these steps. The racism hasn't just been, or sexism hasn't just been a one-off. It hasn't just been a one-off incident, but she may not have documented it. And she's already questioned, is it worth, she's weighed it up. Should I mention this? Should I not? So the one thing that should always be borne in mind is, at the point she's come to you as HR or as a manager, that is the point where it's become too much to deal with alone. So that's just the kind of basic human element of it. Once she's come to you, it means she cannot deal with it alone. Now, at this point, and this is the key part, there has to be a neutral process, which isn't, can you give me documented explicit examples, because she will give you them, but understanding that in this moment the only thing, and there's no direct process around this, but the only thing that you're required of in this moment is to provide a safe space. And in so doing, the line of questioning, as it were, shouldn't be about her validating or justifying why she thinks it's racism or sexism, but rather listening. Because in the story, there will be nuance. In the story, there will be pieces of information that you need to pay attention to. And this is the moment. Because after she's left and she's maybe complained about person X, the initial step here isn't to go, this might be a difficult case because X is this and that within the company, but rather the question is, have we had these issues with this person point blank? Namely, does this person have a record for being difficult with women? Does this person have a record for being difficult with marginalized and minoritized groups? Does this person specifically have an issue with Black people? Because at this moment, it shouldn't be that it's an excavation process to find ways to circumvent the issue. This is the critical part. By dealing with the issue and understanding that there will be some difficulty and potentially raising it if you have a CHRO who sits above you, or, to your department head, to say, we have an issue here. I'm going to investigate to see if this person's track record is, if they have come up in anything like this before putting the burden on the Black colleague. Because how you question it will be a direct correlation to how she then will A, feel during the process, but B, how the process will then run. Because usually after that point, I think the phrase is restorative justice, where you sit down and you talk to your perpetrator. If this person happens to be a very senior person, and even if not, the opportunity in and of itself provides a backdrop for gaslighting. Because in the end, the key phrase is, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. It was meant to have been a joke. Is a very, it's usually an opt-out to actually take responsibility. So once again, this is where there has to be some sort of neutral process that doesn't involve it being a case of he said, she said, or she said, against each other, but rather ascertaining, A, did it happen? Because in a lot of cases, not A, did it happen in that sense. In a lot of cases, when you ask the perpetrator, aggressor, whichever word you like to pick, if it happened, they usually don't deny that it happened. It's just caveated with, I didn't mean it like that. So this is where the person who has caused offence has to be held accountable. There isn't a get out clause of no. So how do you hold them accountable? It might be penalisation with pay. It might be that they also have to do some compulsory training that is escalated to their manager. It depends on how senior they are, of course. But the point is, it can't just be left to a, he or she didn't mean it, it's fine. Let's keep it moving. Because that undermines the process and the experience. Because if you're bearing in mind the backdrop for Black women, especially within asset management, there's not that many. To make progression, you want to not be seen as the difficult Black woman. So a lot of the times, there's a lot more going on than what's being reported. Then you remember that she's only coming to you because she doesn't feel like she can deal with it alone anymore. Circumventing it because it's inconvenient does further damage. Because at the moment she feels as though this is going to be, okay, I've got to prove it, I've got to show it. He's already said potentially he's sorry. and everyone's gone, oh, that's fine, he said he's sorry, or they've said they're sorry, she's already on her way out. She's already going. And this is why we're seeing loads of black women leaving financial services. It's also because of this. So this is where an ecosystem lens has to come into play, but also understanding the particular experience that black women have within the workplace. Understanding that it's not just a case of, oh yes, we're going to put you in a room together and then we're going to discuss it and an apology is fine. An apology still doesn't take away from what's been done, A. And B, there has to be some sort of corrective action. Even if you have apologized, the fact that something's happened means you didn't either understand or didn't care as to why you did it. So there has to be a process around that. And the process around that is obviously going to be difficult, especially if the perpetrator is senior, especially if the perpetrator is in a revenue generating position. But this is the part of really committing to gender equity. This is the part of really doubling down and saying, we are going to look at this process, understanding the background, the context, taking it very seriously that when a black woman does decide to complain, she's been through these 4 steps beforehand and said, you know, am I sure? Is this right? Gone over it. Should I really do this? Is it worth the hassle? Do I really want to have this conversation? Can I be bothered to have conversations where people ask me over and over again, am I sure? Do I want to have conversations where I'm told this is how much the company supports black people, women, etc.? Can I be bothered to become continuously inflicted with the rhetoric that we do everything? And when I am telling you, this is not my experience, I'm going to be bulldozed into saying this is your experience, you're just being difficult. Because it's also understanding that there is the explicit and the implicit, let's say, storyline here. You can say you support somebody, but if they're making a complaint, then you're implicitly telling them, or something even explicitly telling them, that you don't care, that you're not interested. Steps 1, 2, 3, and finally getting to step 4 can take months sometimes. It takes months, doubt, it takes self-questioning. Have I been too sensitive? Because that's also going to happen. You've been overly sensitive. Can't you take a joke? All of these things. Because ultimately, as a manager or within HR, you still need to protect, yes, on the one hand, the company, but you need to protect a vulnerable person in this particular situation. So it's something to think about. The backdrop of black women deciding to make complaints, or anybody deciding to make complaints, is this. But the outcome and the potential for damage and the systemic racism and sexism of the workplace in general means that the chances and the effects that it has are exacerbated when you sit at this particular intersection of race and gender. So thank you, as always, for taking the time to listen. And I wish you a great day. Goodbye.